Hey, welcome back to another episode of Taste Kitchen. And as you guys know, we do some pretty crazy things here in Taste Kitchen. And today we're going to do something that is, I don't think we've ever done, and that is a whiskey lab. And the idea is pretty simple. We picked 3 major whiskeys across the United States, and we're going to air them all. So just stay with us, because it's going to be a wonderful day, I think, for as you guys understand and explore whiskeys, whether you're looking for it as an enthusiast or maybe in your restaurant operation. And our first whiskey that we're going to be covering today is Milam Greene out of Austin, Texas. I've got Heather Greene, who is the CEO, the master blender, and the girl wonder there at Milam Greene. Great to have you on the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. Thanks, super
Heather,
appreciate it.
Yeah, Heather, so we got a chance to do a whiskey flight many, many years ago in New York City at the Flatiron. And
Yes.
You've done a lot of things since then. I want to kind of hear about your career and kind of what's happened with how you landed at Milam Greene.
Sure. Well, I've been in whiskey seriously and full time since about 2005. So a little over 15 years. And then before that, working in restaurants and bars and really into it. So I have 20 years of really working in the industry. And when we met, I was at the Flatiron Room in Manhattan, and that's owned by Tommy Tardy, still a really great friend of mine, amazing whiskey expert in his own right, and great businessman. That's where we met. And at that time, I was writing my book, and not only was teaching whiskey classes and working with this, I think we had 3,000 different whiskeys that we were working with at the time. So it was a great place to write a book, and got that published. Let's get everything in a nutshell. Scotland, and then I was an ambassador for a Scotch company, William Grant & Sons, and then moved on to the Flatiron Room, and then wrote a book. And then I had my own business. So I was working and traveling around the world and teaching whiskey and opening markets and branding and tasting and judging and things like that. And along my travels, probably about 6 years into working for myself, and met these great people in Texas. And Marsha Milam was here. She was heading up this amazing whiskey project. And the Hill Country, which is about 45 minutes outside of Austin and San Antonio. So it's equidistant between the two, in Blanco. And I met Marlene Holmes, who was a senior distiller at Jim Beam for 27 years. So that's pretty hard to make a bad whiskey when you've got her at the helm. And this tremendous brewer named Jordan Osborne. So the 3 of them, I was like, well, yeah. And then Austin. Who doesn't
So you
love
kind of
this
got
city,
the best
Texas?
of all worlds, it sounds like. A great team, an amazing place when you look at the Hill Country in Texas. I don't know if a lot of people really understand the magical nature that area of the country has. It's pretty cool. Hey, listen, so I'm really stoked about, I've never had this whiskey. I'm a huge bourbon and whiskey aficionado. I think I've probably had maybe a couple hundred. So I'm probably paling in comparison to the number of tastes that you've got to do. So I can't wait to get into it. We're going to jump down into 2 of your selections that you guys sent to us. And the first one is this little guy right here, which is the blend of straight bourbon whiskeys, the triple cask, Milam Greene. Talk to me a little about this one right here.
I am super excited. I mean, both of these whiskeys are really tremendous. So when I met Marsha and the rest of the team, Marlene and Jordan, they had this incredible inventory of whiskeys, and they were making whiskey, right? So they were distilling, and they had this incredible collection of casks from around the US at different ages. And this whiskey is a reflection of, I think, 20 years of whiskey tasting, of taking what Marlene and Jordan made at the distillery in Blanco. So this beautiful, robust, peppery, fiery spirit, real Texan kick kind of thing. A great personality. In fact, you can drink it on its own as well. And then take other casks that we had, so you can read about that. We talk right about it on the label. And then bring those together. So we vat all those together, and that is the triple cask. So it's 3 different casks that are coming together. So there's a very, very old whiskey. So I think of whiskey batching and blending as like cocktail making. You were like, it needs a little of this, it needs a little of that. So you
Right.
have this vintage whiskey, this very, very old bourbon. So we're talking 10 to, for in bourbon terms, not Scotch, but very old. So 10 to maybe 14 years old. And then we vat that, or we don't, you put this in a vatting tank, and with a whiskey at 4 years old, and a nice 4-year-old has a lot of vanillas. It's very creamy. And then you have, for some real like spice and character, to give it some, I mean, it's really important to have a back end, some nice tannins and a little kick. And then you've got the Texan whiskey. So that's the three triple casks coming together.
I like that. Great explanation. When you look at some of the characteristics of this whiskey, and everybody kind of compares all whiskey to Kentucky whiskey. But I have found, and I'm continuing to, yes, and I am finding though that there's some great distilleries across our country that I continue to discover, all the way up into Vermont with Whistle Pig. Obviously, what's happening in Texas, you guys are absolutely killing it. What are some of the key characteristics that you would say, if you're a bourbon or a whiskey drinker, these are the things you would like about this one?
Well, I think, a couple of things that you said I think are quite interesting, which is talking about Kentucky whiskey. Now, Kentucky whiskey is, the godfather. You can make bourbon anywhere in the United States, but Kentucky whiskey, they've been doing it for so long and really refining it. It's really beautiful. And for me, it's like, if my whiskey couldn't compare, or our whiskey, what Marlene and Jordan, Marsha and I have made, like if it couldn't sit on a shelf next to the finest whiskeys, then I don't see the point. So, because the consumer will always go back to the most refined they could do. So for those, so that's the first thing. And then the second thing, for a consumer to taste this whiskey, if you like beautiful Kentucky whiskeys, and you want to support a great local brand, and have that refined taste with a little bit of like kick to it, I think this is what it is. And that whiskey was designed to really be enjoyed 3 ways. So as a whiskey drinker, it was very important to me that if you picked it up without any ice, it had to taste good. The second thing was that if you add ice to it, now a lot of parts of the United States are very hot, right? So here I am in Texas, 90 degrees every day. I don't tend to drink my whiskey neat here. I don't even really reach for scotches anymore. It just, my body doesn't really physically feel like it needs like a big warming whiskey. So you throw ice on it.
Right.
It had to taste good with ice. And then we tested it out in numerous cocktails to make sure that it still had personality, didn't get lost in a cocktail. So if you want to drink it 3 ways.
I like it. Now I'm picking up a really heavy vanilla nose on this, on the front end, but it seems to kind of, as it's maturing there in the glass, I'm picking up some different notes. What was the goal when you guys were trying to put this baby in a bottle?
The goal for me has always been to create those layers that you're talking about, those layers of character, so that it is not unidimensional, right? So vanilla is most humans can detect vanilla. Vanilla is something that we're actually we're born being able to taste from a biological perspective, right? So vanilla is an aromatic compound that comes out of wood. The molecule is called vanillin with an N. It can exist in different places in nature. So you do taste that vanilla, but you need to go through that, and there should be layers after you go through the vanilla. So it was important to us to have that complexity of nosing. And I think this whiskey, so when you compare it to the next one, you want to have 2 great personalities when you do a first release. You don't want them to taste too similar. So this one I think of as very fruity. It's very, has a wonderful bouquet. I wanted the florals to pop, but when you taste it, it should also really stand up and be really robust with its tannins and spice. So when you taste it, you'll see that.
Well, the nose
complexity
is amazing.
Is key. Thank you.
I love it. I love what you guys have done with it. And there's certain things when you look at, and me, I kind of go all over the map, whether it's Japanese whiskey, I look at, things like Whistle Pig, and I'm still a Kentucky bourbon lover as well, and I'm starting to explore some of the Texas whiskeys that have really impressed me, so it's going to be interesting on this one, because this one really has a great nose.
I I have, as you and I had first met many years ago, I've been a big Japanese and Scotch whiskey fan as well. And the
Oh,
way they
wow.
put casks together is just incredible. So if you think about Japan, or, you and I had early on had talked about Yamazaki. So the way Suntory works is they have various, or Nikka, in Japan, they have various distilleries up and down Japan and warehouses. And when it's time to create a beautiful whiskey, they will take casks from around Japan. They will take distillate from different stills. And the idea is create the best whiskey you can with the consumer in mind. So the ultimate drinker in mind. And this is how I approach whiskey making. And I think that this is what shows in our products, because as opposed to, this is another method, but if you're like all one spot, one grain to glass, the beauty of that is everything is just born out of that one spot. We do that too, but I really like to open it up and say, you know what, we are open to use. We actually go into Kentucky now, and we use stills, giant column stills into Kentucky, in addition to the ones we have at Blanco.
Very cool. Talk to me a little bit about how long the process is for this whiskey, getting it, all the way through its life cycle and into this beautiful concoction you guys have created.
Well, the very oldest whiskey then would be over 10. So that's a Tennessee whiskey. So that would be, the process would be making a Tennessee whiskey. So it's going to have that maple charcoal filtering process that gives it that kind of nice, beautiful mellowness to it. You age that for 10 years. You don't chill filter it. So you keep it very rich, non-chill filtered. And then you bring that in, we bring that into Blanco. We bring different ages into Blanco, and then we go through different casks and look to see how they work together. So the process of making a whiskey like this, we had, you had just hundreds of glasses, and it's like, what percentage of each cask goes into this to make this personality? Is it more of this? Is it less of this? What does that look like? How do you proof it? Proofing is a really I think very complicated process that people really don't quite understand, because proofing really makes a big difference in how your whiskey tastes. It doesn't mean higher proof is better. A lot of people really believe that. That's not the case. It's you proof to taste, which is what we did on a panel. So that process takes a while. And then you have like 20 or 30 different combinations of casks coming together, and then you really need to do that blind. I believe in that. So you do that blindly, and you say, you know what, we all liked, or a majority of us liked, blend or Meritage, whatever you call it, vatting number 8. Then you take a couple of maybe those, and then you proof those at different percentages, and then you test it in market. And there you go. But it starts.
I love it.
This
one I love the
detailed in that.
I'm just going to say the finish on this one is really, really amazing. The back palate, I'm telling you, this is one of those, I think that for me, this is a neat whiskey. I would go this route, even in the dog days of summer here in Miami. And I still love drinking whiskey neat, just because I don't want to mess with the flavors in any way. And I'm always worried about that when I put ice in. I think that's kind of a thing some people like and maybe some don't. But if you're maybe new into whiskey tasting, that's a great way to kind of understand or at least be able to tolerate some whiskeys. Sometimes they're a little bit new to people when they're first getting into whiskey tasting. All right, so this one's got a great finish. I love the color of this, the caramels, and of course the nose on this one is amazing itself. I would put this right up there with some of the best I've had so far. So definitely in the top.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. That's going to make our whole team so happy.
Yeah, that's a top 10. Thank you.
We've got a lot of great awards and reviews for our whiskey. So we're really, really excited. And our team, the team I work with is it's hard to make a bad whiskey when you're working with these guys. Not me just making it.
That's you have to be, that's part luck, but sometimes I think you make your own luck in the whiskey business for sure. All right, we're going to bump over to our next bottle here, and this is your rye. I'm really excited about this one. To date, the Whistle Pig is still my favorite rye whiskey, so we will see if this can unseat the Whistle Pig. If it
It's
can.
very different than Whistle Pig. Because it's quite different, but I'll love to see what you think. So this has if the triple cask has that Texan grain to glass spirit in it, to add that, I mean, it's very important to me that no matter where you are, you add a sense of place to your whiskey. You add a sense of personality into it. And I believe terroir comes in many forms, including the people as well as social terroir, or who you are, where you are, how you make it, how you approach making it, as much as it is the raw grain and the environment and the warehouse. So this is a really fun experiment. It actually started out as an experiment. We're like, hey, let's take some of these rye whiskeys that we had in our warehouse at different ages and then throw those into port cask from Portugal and see how the Texan sun, the Blanco Hill Country sun, which is, weather actually, which really goes like this. Some days it's 50 degrees in January, and then the next day it's 80, you're from here. And then the next day it's raining, and then the next day it's hot again. And it really did a number on those port casks. It basically acted, I think, like an accordion on those casks and infused tremendous flavor into that whiskey really, really fast. And then the next day it might rest because it's cooler and more humid out. And with my experience in the Scotch industry, I really thought this would take probably 9 months to a year to really add that port sheen over the rye. This is important to me to make a rye to separate it out from other ryes, to make it have a different personality. And how do you do that? No, the port finish wasn't actually my idea. It was someone on my team's idea. Not me. I can't take credit, although I helped shepherd it through the system. And Marlene called one day and was like, oh my gosh, it was really quick. It was probably like 6 weeks into the process. And she said, this was already really strong. We got to dump this. We got to take this out of the port cask. Yeah. Wow. So we had to quickly, it had happened so quickly in the hill country. And then it was almost too strong. So we then had to do a second fill in our port cask and then a third fill. And then we finally kind of mingled these together until we got that finish. So there should be a port, like a dark cherry, a dark fruit, currants, almost like a toffee, coffee and toffee flavor. And then underneath that, it's very rich. Underneath that, your rye.
I love that, and you're right. You've got that great nose that's almost smothering that entire. I love that when you look at nosing whiskey, because I know that I've watched you taste and judge many times, and the nose is really an important part. And I think a lot of people that are either getting into whiskey drinking, or maybe they're a bar or a restaurant, of being able to help their customers understand how much and why the nose matters. Talk to us a little bit about that, because I think that's part of the experience around whiskey that people kind of miss.
I'm so glad you said that. So nosing is everything. I mean, nosing maps directly to the most ancient, or, how we smell and our olfaction, or, how we receive aromatics and smell maps directly to the most ancient part of our brain, right? So this is the part of our brain that links into memory, links into emotion. And I think that I think nosing is doing so many things. It's creating memories, it's creating emotion. And then also, this is where we get most of the personality on a whiskey. It's not on our taste buds. Right. It's how we nose. So for me, I'm doing a whiskey school series online, and most of the classes so far, I think 7 episodes, are just nosing. Like, how do you do that? Just on nosing. And what is it? What is it that's actually going into your nose? When we talked about vanilla, what is it? Well, it's a little molecule smell. That's
I
it.
like it.
You're right. They smell, and you're inhaling little molecules, attaches to your receptor, sends a message to your brain, and you like it or you don't. You can also have your retronasal olfaction. So yes, whiskey is all about the nose, and then you taste it. There's that, as I said, the retro olfaction, which is the aromatics coming back through your receptors.
Oh, wow.
And then
That's
you put it together
amazing.
all together. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank
you
you.
guys have really done something special with this rye.
Well,
Now
it
talk
just
to me.
won
Okay,
double gold in San Francisco, so we're very excited.
oh, really? Okay, well, then there you
Yeah,
go.
you have good
I'm kind of
taste.
curious because this is something that I've often wondered, and I get different answers from different whiskey distillers and people in the business about geography, because geography in the wine business that's a huge part of how grapes grow and how you get the certain kinds of varietals that really make up great wine. How does geography really affect whiskey? When you look at the map of the United States, Kentucky's a kind of a special place. But you also look up in Vermont, I could say with the exception of the cold season, they have a lot of similarities. What is the difference when you start moving into places like California, Texas, a little bit more arid in some cases? How will that affect the making of whiskey?
That is a great question. So one of the things that we're doing is experimenting. So we're actually going to be we're supposed to do it before the pandemic and other things happen in May. So we couldn't get all of our stuff and experiment the way we wanted to, but we will be sending casks all over the United States to monitor the effects of terroir and aging on our casks. So we get a little bit more detail, but very specifically in Texas. Texas is a big state. A lot of people like to say what a Texas whiskey is. I'm a bit of a outlier here, and I say I don't think we know yet. Scotland has 400 years at least behind them making whiskey. You've got Kentucky with a couple hundred years, different northeast of America, and Texas. When you really think about the history, we don't really know yet. But what we do know is to answer your question, what is the arid heat? What is the arid or dry dryness in the air due to it? So hot temperatures, it's not just your temperature, it's the humidity in the environment as well, as you know. So if you look at an extreme like Scotland, it's very temperate climate, high humidity. High humidity means lower water evaporation. You're going to have lower rates of evaporation out of your whiskey. Hot temperatures, when it's super dry, means you're going to evaporate. The water's going to evaporate out of that cask. So the water's going to be the first thing to go. And if you have high evaporation rates in your cask, what happens inside the cask?
Yeah, you lose your whiskey.
You lose your water, and your ABV goes up, and it becomes very, very strong. It becomes very, very rich. So you're losing your water, but what's left, your H2O is gone. It's all a game of little molecules playing against each other. Your H2O leaves, and when you're left with your ethanol, your ethyl alcohol inside, very strong. Water is also soluble. So when you lose water out of a cask, you're actually losing that ability of the liquid inside to get a lot of those sugars as well. So that's why a lot of people who have hot, arid temperatures, what they're learning is that when you lose your water, what remains in the cask can be super tannic, less sweet, very strong, a little rough around the edges. So in a place like Texas, you better be monitoring all the time. Some people add water. Yeah.
I like that. So, and you're sending casks. Yeah, so you're sending casks all around the country to test different geography impacts, I guess, on the whiskey itself, and then monitoring that throughout the process to look at that. Okay, that's pretty amazing. Very scientific.
Well, I mean, because I think that's the only way to really get more understanding of what's actually happening in a cask, but very specifically within Texas. So I'm really curious. I think a cask in hot, humid environment in Houston is going to be very, very different than a cask north of Dallas or East Texas or West Texas. It's a giant state. And then, of course, you have California with tremendous. What is a California whiskey? Well, if you're aging a cask in Southern California, it's going to be very different than Northern California. So,
definitely.
these things I'm very curious about.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so excellent job on your rye. I can see why you guys have won some awards with this one already. Congratulations on that one. Definitely an excellent one. When you look at recommendations to restaurant operators or within the industry, bar owners, et cetera, and you look at these two whiskeys, because these are completely unique and different in their own way, and in many cases, a restaurant operator may not necessarily carry both. If you were looking at this and saying, hey, if you're going to buy one of my whiskeys today, which one would you kind of lean them toward? I know they're like kids.
Oh, that's hard. It really depends on where your gaps are in your menu, and where you're looking to, sort of add variety, or of course, you're looking at your cost of goods as a restaurant owner as well. And you're thinking about those things and what your customers are buying. So I can just give you two examples. I had, if the Milam Greene bourbon is the bourbon is cost less than the rye, so there's that consideration as well. So I think about those things because I'm also working and running a business. I understand there's money involved and what does it cost and things like that, and where do you want it? What is the price of your cocktail? So I think about those things. So if you're keeping those kinds of things lower, then you go for the triple cask. And that was very, and if you're doing traditional old fashions and you have a really great old program that likes to do traditional bourbon cocktails, then you would go for the triple cask. If you're looking for a rye, there's a big rye resurgence. So if you are a restaurant operator and you're like, you know what, I want a rye that stands out. I want it to be a whiskey drinker's rye. People who like scotch, people who want a really robust cocktail that are okay with spending a little bit more money in a cocktail or neat, then I'd go for the rye. So there's some restaurants here in Austin when we, in January, were out before we had to close our restaurants and bars here, unfortunately. There were some that just wanted the rye. They're like, you know what, I want a Texan rye. That's cool. This is what we're going to do.
Yeah, I love that. Well, that was a good one. You dodged it. That's okay.
I know. They're just so different. They're not similar.
They are very unique, and I think for a bar owner, I think you hit it on the head. If you're a bar owner and you're trying to create a whiskey drinker's menu, because you need certain staples on a great menu in terms of whiskey. I know when I go to a restaurant, and whether it's a fine dine or even a casual, I kind of judge how the experience is going to start by what their whiskey selection is. So I think it's a very important part of putting that whole puzzle together, especially nowadays, because we're going to see more and more consumers really hyper connecting with their restaurants and their bars in different ways, and being able to really win. That's why I think there's going to be unfortunately some casualties in the industry, but I also think that there's going to be some companies like what you guys have done that maybe get some surgence and start hitting a lot more of that top shelf in some of the bars and restaurants out there. So congratulations on everything you guys are doing out there.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate that.
Absolutely.
That's
Heather,
we hope that people want to do that. Reach for the local and smaller brands.
I like that. Yeah. It's been great having you on today. This has been amazing.
Thank you.
For my first taste of Milam Greene, I am impressed. I would definitely give this a top score. So congrats.
That means a lot. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. We all do.
We're going to definitely have you back on for sure.
Okay.
All right. So all of you guys listening in, maybe you're watching over on YouTube or on one of our channels out there, that you're saying, well, hey, listen, we really want to see more and more content like this. We are trying to expand the Whiskey Lab a little bit more. So if you've got maybe a whiskey that's an unknown or a dark horse that you think should make it over here to the Whiskey Lab, make sure and send us a note to producer@foodabletv.com. If you're on YouTube, listen, give us some comments. Tell us what you think about this. If you've had a chance to have Milam Greene, then maybe you've got some great tasting notes and some nosing notes for us to really explore more whiskeys, especially in the state of Texas, because I've seen so many great whiskeys start to come out of there, and I'm really interested in seeing more. But anyway, stay tuned right here on Taste Kitchen for more great stuff from Foodable Network. We'll catch you next time.